Hi there, it's Matthew Blades, and welcome to another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It. Today we're going to sit down with someone that you might know, Duchesne. He's an American actor, producer, stunt performer, and writer. You may have seen him in Dexter, Los Americans, Marauders with Bruce Willis, or in the movie Heist with Robert De Niro. He's here today to talk to us about his journey through trauma using ketamine. And I was saying to him, and at one point I say in this interview, it's so fascinating to me. You know, we've done 160 something episodes of Learn from People Who Lived It, and 98% of them have been about something else. But for whatever reason, the last 5 or 6 interviews, ketamine keeps showing up. And you guys know that I just had my first experience with ketamine, and while I can't sit here and tell you it was the most profound thing that ever happened to me, I can tell you that I feel it working in the background, just kind of having this little impact on how things are going. I'm excited for you to jump into this episode with us today. If you're somebody who's grown up and you've experienced really difficult traumas, or you're just a bunch of these little T's that have somehow, some way had an impact on you, I think that there are things said today that should unlock pieces of the way you're thinking about it. And what I mean by that specifically is this idea that, yes, we've all gone through things. We've all had our hits along the way. But those things are not still happening, and yet so many of us have the operating system still playing in our head as though it is happening. So lots to learn on this episode of Learn from People Who Lived It today. Let's jump right in with Duchesne, and I've invited my buddy Chad McClain to join us on this episode as well.
Looking for no bullshit conversation about mental health? Find Learn from People Who Lived It wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from People Who Lived It.
Welcome to another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It.
Duchesne is here. He's the CEO of BetterU. And I want to ask, man, everybody always starts things because they need it first. And so what is BetterU, like the elevator pitch version of it?
BetterU is a holistic mental wellness company. We focused and came to market with ketamine therapy because back in 2019, it saved my life. And now we've evolved into other modalities like psychiatric care, meditations, breath work, talk therapy, sexual health, all the different things. But we started there, and it's really just a platform for people that are going through it and understanding that we're in a world that's overprescribed and overdiagnosed. And if you're having mental health struggles and you went to see a psychiatrist and they put you on a bunch of stuff that's, may have helped for a little bit, may have made you worse, or never helped at all, or now you're in a darker place and you've been labeled treatment resistant, this is the place you come to find community and other types of modalities to help you reconnect with yourself.
Yeah, gosh, I think that's the answer to the question, like, who do you hope hears our podcast today? It's like that group of people who, similar to me, had a really long history with talk therapy and just in and out of different therapists' office and never really landing on the nugget or the thing until a few years ago when I went outside the traditional realm and went into more of a spiritual journey with my healing. And that's where I, too, found such a profound change in who I am and what it's all about. I'm going to bring in a guy to join us on this podcast, and you're going to understand really clearly why as soon as I do. His name is Chad McClain, and Chad was one of the very first people that I ever interviewed here on Learn from People Who Lived It, and he was a dude who nearly took his life a few years ago, and through a bunch of different modalities, including ketamine, he found profound results. And then his wife went on the healing journey herself, and she found profound results. I personally just went to Enlighten Wellness about 3.5, 4 weeks ago for my very first ketamine session. And so I've got my own thoughts, feelings, and opinions on ketamine. And I know we're going to shake all that stuff out today as we talk. But Chad, I want to bring you in, and there you are. Derek's in the middle now. But I love to start with the first 10 years of people's lives. Like, what is Derek, man, from 0 to 10? Can you give us an understanding of your life growing up?
Yeah, it wasn't until I think very recently in the last few years where I kind of made peace with 0 to 10, Derek, understanding that it wasn't the most normal, and really having like being in a relationship now with somebody and seeing what a real family structure example is. 0 to 10 and a nugget. My parents were married and divorced to each other twice. I came the second time, was born in Southern California. I don't remember parents being together, or being in California. I just always for years stared at my birth certificate like I need to be there. And I earliest memories was of living in an RV next to the petrified forest in Arizona. And there's no, at that time, and this is 36 years ago, there was no other houses or cars. There was nothing there besides our RV and the petrified forest. My mom worked there. She was remarried to somebody that was abusive, not so much to me and my sister, but very physically abusive to her. And I remember hearing as a kid a loud pop, and I came out and he shot her and in like the stomach. And after that, we were sent to go live with my dad in Wisconsin, which was he was getting remarried at the time, and so we lived with my grandma for a bit, and then with my dad. And I had 2 stepbrothers from that, which was great. My mom kind of, went into a different, I was too young and just need to be separated from that in the situation. I think I always just looked at it as like, these are just things that happen in life. And what is life? You get up, you tie your shoes, you brush your teeth, and the journey carries on. Right. And if like, you're still alive, you're still good. But then if do we show up in the world differently because of it? I never thought I did until recently, until a few years back when I really started doing the work, and was like, is it the reason that I overcompensate with work, or the reason that I drove myself to burnout and crazy depression and suicide was like, because I need to value myself or build something of value, or I didn't feel like I was ever going to be valued. Right. And so, yeah, that's 0 to 10. And here we are today.
Man, that's a tough journey, dude. I'm so sorry you had to witness all that stuff. I mean, did your mom end up dying in that incident, or did she? No.
My mom's like she is a force of nature. She survived it. Then became a correctional officer at prisons, and was shanked. She's an interesting woman. Very, very. She was a sniper in the towers. And now I was fortunate enough to be able to move her a few years ago closer to me here in Southern California. And she's had medical problems, really bad medical problems most of my life due to, a lot of traumas and a lot of things that happened in her life. But yeah, I've been kind of taking care of her since I was like 16, 17. And now she's 30 minutes away from me. And she's, it's just nice having like that energy, within reaching distance.
So, the short answer, I'm guessing, is yes and the question is, so clearly all of that trauma you experienced on the way up impacted you in many, many different ways.
Yes. I never thought that it did up until very recently. I just thought these are just everybody goes through stuff.
Right.
Right. And we always feel, that's the thing about trauma and pain and stuff. Like we always feel so alone and nobody understands us and whatever. But the reality is like everybody has pain and everybody has trauma. And whether my pain and trauma from seeing something super traumatic is, a level 7 for me, or somebody that maybe came from a super privileged family that, I don't understand like that upbringing. Right. But they came from, family that's got tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars and a trust fund, whatever. And their trauma is like a level 8 from like seeing somebody get like smacked in their family. It's like everybody's trauma and trauma gauge and how we perceive trauma. I think it's the pain that connects us. And I think it's the healing and the love that helps us grow. Right. But I think everybody has their perspective and their own version, and we're in no place to just because everybody's going through different traumas, like those traumas are different levels for everybody. Right. And I think that it's, that we're all going through something, and the stuff that we go through, as much as we try to say, hey, it doesn't affect me, I'm good, I'm tough, I'm fine. The world still goes on. I'm still, I still got to pay my taxes. I still got to brush my teeth. And the reality is that someday at some point, you're going to have to sit with these things and sit with these traumas and say them out loud, and whether it's to yourself or somebody else, and really like sit with it and be like, how do I feel about this? And how is it affecting the way that you show up in the world? And because there's so many things that I didn't realize that, like, triggers and anger and overcompensation primarily is things that, like, I'm fine. This is just part of who I am. And and apologizing to people. I'm so sorry I spoke to you this way, or I'm so sorry I did this, or I'm so sorry I did that. And the reality is, like, that it was just me responding in a way that my brain's kind of been molded to based off of certain things that happen. But if you sit with it enough, you create that space. And I think this is where ketamine therapy becomes so powerful. Psychedelic therapy is like, it can give us that space to have that choice of how we respond to things and how we show up in the world, and give us that power to take that moment and take a breath and choose how we respond, right? Because nobody...
Can I interrupt you really quick and just ask you, so was it not until ketamine that you were able to put those two things together, that the traumas were impacting the person that you were operating as?
I think it was a combination. So ketamine and story, and I think like Chad and so many others, it's like we reach a point where we're at a breaking point, right? And the traditional psychiatric model has failed us, or we're going through something. I'm crying for help. Let's go see a shaman. Let's go see a doctor. Let's go see a psychiatrist. And they're like, take this pill. That doesn't work. Increase the dosage. Flip the page. Take that pill. And by the next thing you know, you're taking a bunch of Xanax, Adderall, Zoloft. And you're just on this cycle of trying to balance out the last thing, and that can make anybody crazy and suicidal. I think, and overprescribing and overdiagnosing. And I think that with what ketamine therapy really did for me, and allowed me to, with the part that probably saved my life, is that creating that separation and giving us that space in our head where, like, nobody takes their own life because they're thinking clearly, right? They take their life because your brain is telling you, I'm a terrible human being. I'm not worthy of love. Nobody's ever going to love me. I'm a fraud. I'm a piece of shit. Like, nothing's ever... like, I'm not worthy of love, and I shouldn't be here, and this world would be better off without me. And at least that was my experience. And it's just on repeat. And anytime something remotely triggering can happen, it gets back on repeat, and you go deeper and deeper in these cycles. What ketamine did for me was create that separation, so I can just look at my thoughts and all the crazy stuff I'm telling myself that is exactly that. They're just thoughts in my head, and they're not who I am. And I can look at the traumas in my life, and it's like, it's unfortunate that I saw this and witnessed this when I was a kid. It's unfortunate that, I wasn't born into the ideal family structure like most people aren't. But these are just things that happened in my life, and they're not who I am. And these thoughts are just thoughts in my head, and they're not who I am. And so I think that was the beginning of the work, right? And now, years later, being able to then refine with other modalities. But I think ketamine therapy gave me also the motivation and that kind of emotional or mental lubrication to be more receptive to other modalities, and really taking in the time for self-love and meditation and breath work and that time to fill up my own cup, so then I can be a person that brings more love and light into the world.
Yeah, man. Well, Chad, I'm glad you took a drink, because I'm getting ready to come to you next. And I want to start talking ketamine a little bit. As I mentioned, I just had my first experience with it about 2.5 weeks before this whole situation with my mom started to unravel. And it was interesting, the timing of that ketamine session, because I had a super blissful, kind of really happy experience. I detached from my body, and I just enjoyed it. And I felt like I just relaxed into myself, and it was so enjoyable for me and relaxing. And I just feel like it put me in this great mushy state for what was getting ready to happen next. And so when I zoom out and I look at it like that, it's really interesting to me. Chad, you say you had 7 ketamine infusions before, I don't want to say the lights went on, but before you had maybe a major shift. What were the first 6 like, briefly?
Yeah, I mean, the first 6, I was a dare kid from Montana, right? So I like, you're talking ketamine and all this. I'm like, you guys are weirdos, right? Like, there's no way this stuff's going to work. So I didn't know. I literally went in with no expectations, set no intention, and just wrote it out. Probably my one was pretty wild. I remember coming out of that and having the whole disassociation of, hey, me sitting in that chair, I think that's reality. This stuff that we're doing right now is not reality. Like, this is like dimensions, right? People talk about dimensions, and I was like, holy crap, like, where am I? And so those shifts did definitely take place, in those first 6. It was at 7th and 8th that kind of came clarity of, create the brand. But again, probably that 3rd or 4th, I remember one night walking in our backyard. I got 2 little boys. They're both close to 6 and 7. And I remember walking around the corner, and our backyard was destroyed. I'm talking toys everywhere. Things were just, what boys do. And I remember walking around the corner and looking at it, and I had no thoughts in my head. I had no anxiety. Nothing was going on. And I paused, and I was present. And I was like, who cares? These dudes are playing. They're destroying the backyard. This is what boys are supposed to do. And I'm okay with it, because I was, prior to ketamine, I was uber OCD to the max, right? Like, if a sock was out of place or a shoe was out of place or anything, it would trigger me like no other. But now I was in a place where I could actually recognize and go, whoa, this is what it's like to live present. Like, I always heard people, oh, you got to live present, because tomorrow isn't there and all this. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? Like, I have so many things going in my head. I don't know what you mean live present. And so for me, it was the slowing down. It was the immediate, I don't have to react to things. Now I can stop, I can assess the situation, and I can choose to react in a negative manner or a positive manner, or just not react at all and look at it for what it is.
Yes, dude.
So,
yeah, that's it. Because meditation does the same thing for me. It's created a space where I can have that pause before I actually figure out what I'm going to do next. And I love the way that you break that down, man. That's so fantastic. So, Derek, let's get back to you in your journeys, because I don't know how many infusions you've had. I don't even know if it matters. They say you need 3 if you're going to do 3 in a row. And I'm certainly on the books for 2 more. And the way I'm looking at it is like, I'll just go the next time I feel called to it. But what have your journeys been like, and what have you been able to learn?
Well, first, thank you. Thank you so much, Chad, for sharing that. And also, I'm sorry about your mom, brother. That's moving through grief. So you had your session right before you lost your mom? Yeah. That's what I'm saying. So you had yours right before, and you haven't had any after, correct?
No, we just kind of wrapped up, and the funeral was just a couple of weeks ago. It's the time of this recording. Yeah.
So did you have more profound moments during the session, or did you kind of have more profound epiphanies or aha moments like the days or the weeks after the session?
Go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, so one of the biggest breakthroughs I had recently was at Enlightened Wellness, and she does it intramuscular. And prior to that, it was all IV.
What is that, intramuscular? What does that mean?
Intramuscular is just the injection.
Okay.
Into the
that's
shoulder.
where I had mine.
Yep. Otherwise, the IV, it's just a regular IV, and then they drip the ketamine to you. But the intramuscular is more like a rocket ship, I feel. It's an immediate, as opposed to the IV is more of a drip. But the big breakthrough I kind of had, I'm going to say probably 2 months ago, is when I got hit with that, probably 5 minutes into the session, my littlest son came into me. And all he said was, "Hey, Dad, I'm waiting on you." And I was like, what is he like? What is this? And Matt, as you know, Sandy sits there, and during the session, she notates Derek, kind of like what you're talking about or what's coming to you, so you can revisit it later. So I really love that approach, because I never had that before. And so as I'm sitting there and I'm reading this book a day or 2 later, I'm like, okay, like there's just some things, connecting there. But 2 weeks later down the road, I'm laying in bed and I'm just watching my little dude live, right? It's bedtime. I'm rubbing his back. I'm watching him breathe. I'm just taking in the moment. I'm being present. And I just lean over to Colin and I say, "Hey, buddy, I love you." And he goes, "Hey, love you too, Dad." And then there was a kind of pause, and I was like, okay, I got to say this. And I was like, "Hey, I got you." And he turns his little head and he goes, "I know." And right there, I was like, oh, like the whole ketamine thing of like, hey, Dad, I'm waiting on you. And him, again, 5 years old, he's turning his head and he goes, I know. I was like, okay, I connected the dots. So for me, it was like he was waiting for me to level up as a father so I could hold the space for him so he could be his authentic self. And so those are the breakthroughs. Like I had the breakthrough in the session, right? I had the little nudge of, hey, waiting on you, Dad. But it wasn't until 2 weeks later that I really connected those dots through that quick conversation. And so that's what I think is so powerful about all these substances is you can have profound experiences during, but if you don't pay attention, once you're back into this reality, it's hard to connect those dots if you're not open to those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the integration with ketamine is a bit trickier than other psychedelic medicines, and you have to be. I like to keep my voice recorder on for all of my sessions on my phone as well. And yeah, that was really, really profound and really, really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. For my sessions, I've been doing this to the point where I started helping others with it, and recently found out that I always have dealing with my own struggles of helping. Like, am I doing enough? Am I leaving the world a better place? And it was brought to my attention that we've now treated more people than the population of the town that I grew up in. And that's what I think the first time it resonated with me. I'm like, okay, we're making a real impact, and we're making a difference. The first time that I was brought, and I've done other psychedelics, I've been to Burning Man. When I was going through my darkest phase of, long story short, I had helped build this company and scale a company from 20 employees to 300 employees, and was a partner, and spent 300 days on the road in 2019 in 40 countries, educating people and expanding this company. And as you grow and scale, and every day it's just life on that spectrum of, like, I didn't have a passport growing up, so getting paid to travel the world and work was the dream come true for me. And so I was just eating it up, and I can do more, and always putting myself last. And the more expos, just more and more and more. And that turned into me not being able to keep up, not being able to sleep. So I'm taking Adderall, taking Xanax, getting depressed, and now I'm on antidepressants. And within a 6-week period, the person that I thought I was going to marry found out wasn't faithful, and then blamed me for working too much. And then my partners, as I'm on the road, bringing in 80% plus of the revenue that year, we're going through a big acquisition, and we raised $40 million in growth capital. We're going through this huge acquisition, and I get a severance letter while I'm on the road. And then so everything, my whole identity and my happiness and who I was as a man, I didn't realize it at the time, was based on external factors. And I was empty inside. It was all based on my relationship and all based on my work. And without those things, I didn't know who I was. And came home back to Los Angeles. All my furniture, I bought with my ex and Bali, and everything reminded me, of her. And while I was more financially successful than I ever imagined I would be, I was, staring at a bottle of tequila and Xanax every single night, just like watching the sun go up and down, and wasn't showering, wasn't eating. A friend came over to my house after a few weeks of me just not responding to anybody and just being in this like hole. And that night I was sitting out on my balcony, like on the deck, and I was like just in tears and watching what I thought was gonna be my last sunset. And I got the bottle of tequila and bottle of Xanax in front of me, and he came in and he's like, you need help, brother. I'm gonna take you somewhere. And brought me to this ketamine clinic. And even at that point where I'm ready to just leave, the only thing I think keeping me alive was the thought of like, I can't do this to my mom. But like, even at that point, it was like ketamine therapy. It was like, I don't need a horse tranquilizer to feel better. This is stupid. And other friends were like, try mushrooms, you'll feel better. I was like, if I take mushrooms right now, I'm gonna go jump off a bridge. Like, I'm not doing that. And that first session took me almost immediately. It felt like the first time I could breathe in months. It was like, and all of this pressure and weights and guilt and blame and shame and anger and regret and these cycles that I was drowning myself in immediately just gave me a break, like immediately just kind of wiped it clean. And I felt like immediately felt weightless from the medicine, but also like my mind was quiet, and it allowed me to spend some quality time with myself for the first time maybe ever. And get that clarity and perspective that like, I'm not any of these stories that I'm telling myself, and I'm not like the business and these things, like all these things, like, and also like most importantly, I reminded myself that I'm not a victim, right? I'm not a victim, and that is not my mentality. And that's not like everything that I have in this life is because I made it. And maybe if I didn't make the right choices, that's okay. But I will continue to make more and meet more people and find new pathways. And that was my first session. And I could write a novel on how profound that session was. The first time, like after like an hour, 2 hours later, I went for a run, and I hadn't worked out in months, and a friend of mine called me who was in the Bahamas at the time. And he said, I shared what I just went through, and he's like, you got to get out of town. You got to get away from your environment. And he invited me to come stay with him for a couple of weeks. And I did. And that was like my ability to kind of integrate and separate and spend time with like the experience that just happened. And that was it. One session was what brought me back.
Wow, dude.
One session isn't what gave me my, like it didn't help me. It helped me in a crisis situation, but it didn't help me with any kind of long-term issues that I was having. Right. It wasn't until like 7 or 8 months later, the pandemic happened, and started to see, like, I never thought I would be doing this for a living. And I never thought I'd be like dedicating my life to helping others find healing in alternative ways. But once the pandemic happened, I'm like, how many people out there at scale, and millions of people, billions of people, that their entire lives are shifted right now. Their jobs are closing. They're now spending a lot more time at home with their family and wife and kids, and maybe like nobody's used to that dynamic, right? So there's a lot of divorce, like alcoholism, domestic violence, and suicide, and I saw this happening at scale, and I was like, it's my responsibility to, like, I was in alternative healthcare prior, and I didn't know ketamine therapy was a thing, right? So I was like, I need to scream from the top of my lungs, like, if you're suicidal, there is hope. And in my mind, we'd found the cure for suicide. And everybody's different, but in my mind, that's what I believed. And a friend of mine whose sister was the head of epidemiology at Stanford had invited us out for a weekend at Stanford, and she was dating the assistant to Dr. George Greer, who's like a godfather of psychedelics at Stanford. And I shared my story with him for probably the first or second time. That wasn't like a family member. And I had the opportunity to sit in with hospice patients the next day, and they were doing ketamine therapy. And it was some of the most profound experiences of my life, seeing their reactions coming out of it. And then also learn about Ibogaine and LSD for Alzheimer's, and MDMA for PTSD, and all the different psychedelics that are coming, that we've all been told, part of the DARE program, these are going to ruin us. But the reality is that, these pharmaceuticals, a lot of them are the things that ruin us. And I wanted to, like, tell people it's okay if you fail, even if ketamine doesn't work for you, if SSRIs don't work for you, like, there is something that's going to work for you, and let's create that support system and give you access to all the tools, and let's just keep throwing stuff against the wall until something sticks.
Yeah. I love it, man. As we kind of wind down our podcast, let me ask you to reiterate something you just said. What was the psychedelic you mentioned that would be good for Alzheimer's?
So the studies that they're having at this was 2020, and so I think that they're in phase 2 now, but it's an analog of LSD for Alzheimer's and dementia. And if you look at the rate at which Alzheimer's and dementia is accelerated over the last 30 years, and I think a big part of that has to do with benzos, the change in food. There's a lot of theories on why. Nobody knows exactly why, but it's accelerating at such a rapid pace, and there's nothing for it, right? And I thought psilocybin, my mom also struggles with early onset, and so I was like, I'm going to give her a bunch of mushrooms, and this will help. And I learned that they're like, no, actually, a little LSD might be significantly more beneficial. So. In dream fantasy land, in magic wand land, if if I can make anything happen, like as BetterU evolves, would be being able to, in the States, right? So you have the medical support in the States, creating a big, beautiful care retirement assisted living facility where psychedelics is the first line of treatment and support for people, especially whether it's hospice, chronic pain, memory care, and treating them with everything in our arsenal, not just what pharmaceutical companies are making money off of.
Dude, I mean, I really love what you're saying so much. And because I just went through all this shit with my mom, man. Like, we found out she had Alzheimer's, and it was something that we didn't see coming. We have so many people in our family that are dealing with exactly what you just talked about. It's growing. You have to meet Derek. I got to introduce you, and Chad, I should probably introduce you too, man, to this Enthea. It's psychedelic assisted therapy, and they're trying to get it into different human resources. They're trying to work with companies to get it to be an employee benefit. But man, like everybody, it's really fascinating. I haven't talked about ketamine in 70 episodes on this podcast. And then all of a sudden, the last 4 of 8 have been about ketamine. Like, it's something weird is happening here, and by weird I mean cool. So this is all great. Really good timing. What?
Enthea is fantastic. We work with them, and they're fantastic people, and they understand. Like, so there's between ketamine, there's IV, IM, Spravato or nasal, intranasal, and lozenges, right? And I think while IV and IM can be incredibly effective for like suicide and certain things, I think for PTSD, I've seen it go the opposite way and be incredibly traumatic for sexual trauma, and especially for veterans, where your brain is so like, I need to be in control. And if I'm not in control, it's a very scary place. And so I've seen like the oral onset where you kind of go into a medication-enhanced meditation, and you slowly titrate up to a point where then you take you go off into these very deep experiences. I've seen, and in Enthea, like we've had in-depth conversations with provider or like with employers. If you bring on an employee group, right, and they're like, I have a lot of sexual trauma, or I'm a veteran who saw combat, and my brain is programmed when I walk into a room, like I'm looking at the exits, right? Or I'm always looking over my shoulder, and you put them into a place of immediate, like sweep them off their feet, can be very scary and dangerous, right? So the at-home like ketamine protocol, and we do all of them, right? But I think the at-home protocol is you also don't lose that piece of the therapeutic session, which I think is incredibly important. The second you take off the eye mask, it doesn't matter how beautiful of a clinic you're in, your brain goes automatically to the executive mode network, where you're thinking like, I got to get in an Uber, I got to get in a car, even if they're, stay here and journal. Like, your brain immediately goes into that loop where you're like, okay, coming back down, landing, and you kind of lose that space where you'd be at home with a journal or voice recorder and spend another hour digesting and reflecting and processing and sitting with it without like trying to articulate or communicate with another human being, and really like unlocking, like our bodies have that innate ability to heal, right? Like you get a finger cut, you clean it out, you don't really think about it. And I think our brain has the same ability, and this is kind of like the fertilizer for that. So it's different approaches for different things. And I think that we need to be careful. While ketamine is phenomenal for a lot of things, it's also being done improperly in a lot of places. And it's also not the psychedelic or panacea or silver bullet that a lot of people make it out to be. It's a catalyst for us to do the work, and you still got to do the work. Like Chad said, you got to do the integration. You got to spend the time for yourself, and you have to integrate these practices into your daily life. Otherwise, you're not going to cement lasting changes and healthier habits and thought patterns.
Chad, I didn't know about all that, man. I didn't know there was different ways to take the ketamine, and then based on how you ingest it, that could lend to your experience. That's a really interesting thing. How do you usually get it, Chad? You say you do the muscle one, so that's the shot?
Yeah, I've had the most profound experience on the intermuscular. I've tried the lozenges, but candidly, they're a horrible, horrible taste, and I didn't quite have the trip, I guess you would say, that I did with the intermuscular. Mm-hmm. And then the IV is a slow drip. So you can kind of control that, right? Like if you get through a really bad area, they can kind of dial it back a little bit if they need to, or where, like I said, the intermuscular, once it's in, it's go time. And so you just, you latch on, you sit down, you go for the ride. And the reason I am such a massive advocate for ketamine, and Derek could probably correct me on this, but you have a lot of veterans and first responders that are on some kind of SSRI or some kind of antidepressant, right? They're on some pharmaceutical. Well, ketamine, you can go do a ketamine session while you're on what we call gear, right? Pills, pharmaceuticals. You can still go through the process. To where most retreats, you've got to be 100% clean. If you go over to Peru to do ayahuasca, or you go down to Mexico to do a psilocybin retreat, or what have you, you've got to be completely cleaning your gear. And that's super hard for a lot of veterans that have been on medicine for, let's say, 15 plus years to, completely. And
dangerous to go clean if not properly.
Yeah, exactly. I was, when I came out, I was on 150 milligrams of Effexor. And I essentially knuckle dragged and went from 150 to 75 on my own. And man, oh man, I know what maybe a heroin addict or an alcoholic trying to become dry feels like. It was miserable. And so that's why I'm such a massive advocate for ketamine, because it's there, it's legal. If it's done right and set and setting with the integration, like, it profoundly can change. I mean, like I said, I've been off of all pharmaceuticals now for the last year and a half. I'm down 50 pounds. I look at food differently. Like, I don't ever drink anymore. And before, like, I could drink anybody under the table. Now it's like, I might have a glass of whiskey with a good steak. Other than that, I'm not interested in it. So ketamine, I think, could be a massive catalyst for a lot of people to get out of their own way.
And you're absolutely right. Is like in order to even get prescribed for insurance covered ketamine for Spravato, you have to currently be on and failed 2 antidepressants, right? Which is such a ass backwards way to treat medicine. But yes, because it's in the safety profile of it, right? It's been actively used in hospital. Like, if you have an infant child and they break their arm and they end up in the hospital, they're mainlining their IV ketamine with them, because at high doses, it's not going to affect your respiratory system, despite what, all the misinformation about, Matthew Perry came out. That was mixing opiates, and ketamine. But ketamine by itself is incredibly, incredibly safe. And when you're looking at, like, most people that come to ketamine therapy, from my experience, and from the hundreds of doctors across the country that we work with, is that they will come prescribed an SSRI or prescribed benzos and realize very, very quickly, like, and some people, meds can and do and help them, right? But the serotonin, like, myth has been debunked. The SSRIs are not beneficial. They benzos, unless there's they can be helpful for things, but they're also incredibly addictive, and getting off benzos is dangerous in a long path. And with ketamine therapy, like, a lot of people will say, like, I came to this and I, like, had no intention. I came for depression and chronic stress, and I had no intention of quitting smoking or quitting drinking, or I'm nicer to my kids now, or I'm nicer to my wife. And, like, I didn't come into it with any of this intention, but I realized that my relationship with alcohol, or my relationship with smoking, or my relationship with food was not serving me. And it gave me that kind of that click. And so what you said is, like, when all of those things that you mentioned is such a, like, profound, real holistic, like, a way for you to like, you can't change unless you want to change, right? And we come to treatment or different therapies because we want to change, but actually doing it is, like, the best therapist gets us there by asking the right questions, right? And what I believe ketamine therapy does for us, it allows us to find the answers ourselves and ask the questions ourselves, even the questions that we don't want to ask, or if somebody else asks us, we may not listen or be receptive to. So all those things, Chad, you are spot on. And thank you for sharing.
About 100 nuggets in today's podcast. It's, I mean, really, we just said some really important things today, and similar to drugs and all the other things that we've been talking about, one of these nuggets is going to be the right one for you. And it's just about latching on to the thing that speaks to you. And what I really resonate the most with I think both of you dudes, is that you're something I call transitional characters, where, you're the one in your family who's been sent here to shift and to move your lineage into a different space in a different direction. And that's hard. That's a lot of work, and that's a lot of weight to feel like it's on your shoulders. But it's clear to me that both you sort of embody that whole thing. Derek, what's next for BetterU, man? For the folks that are listening to us right now, who's the ideal person to come into business with you?
To come into business or come into treatments?
You tell me, man. I want to make sure that we're serving you the best way. So you tell me right now what you guys are, and let's be transparent. When you're in meetings and you're talking to your team and you guys are dreaming up what's next for you guys and what you really need to get there, what are some of those things?
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity to share. Right now, so like I said, we came to market because ketamine therapy helped me, and I wanted to give people not just here's your medicine, here's one-on-one support with licensed therapists and coaches from pre-session, post-session, months later, goal setting and programs for grief and sexual trauma and all the things that we all go through, and we've done that very, very well. The number 2 and 3 programs that we're launching outside of our talk therapy is number 1 side effect from antidepressants is weight gain. Number 2 side effect is sexual side effects. And so right now we've launched for our existing patient base weight gain or weight loss programs that also include dietitians and wraparound care and support and app support and all of those fun things, as well as sexual health programs, because a lot of our sexual health comes from trauma and also medications to help counteract the damage that's come from other SSRIs and those types of things. What I'm looking for right now is more licensed clinicians, more NPs and PAs that are aligned with the mission. We have a psychedelic therapy training program, and our goal now and what we've evolved into is taking the right clinicians and NPs and PAs and doctors and training them not only on the psychedelics programs, but now on our holistic health programs, where we're incorporating longevity medicines and holistic approaches and habits and communities. So doctors that want to learn, that don't come with the stigmas of here's why X, Y, and Z is X, Y, and Z, and understanding that most of their training was paid for by pharmaceutical companies, and so looking for more of that. I've also bootstrap this, and my goal was to, if we could save one person from ending their life, it's a win. Now we're in 18 or so states. We're expanding to 25 states in the next the coming months. I need more providers, and looking for strategic partners like Enthea and similar organizations or enterprise businesses that want to do more for their employees, and understanding it's a holistic approach to wellness. And so the ketamine therapy, like what's fascinating about Enthea and other employee benefits companies that you're seeing, that it used to be ketamine therapy used to be a last line of defense for depression. And now a lot of larger corporations, even though insurance isn't there yet, but a lot of larger corporations are starting to use ketamine therapy as a first line of defense because they see how much money it saves them long term. So for employee benefits and any other corporations out there that's looking for, whether it's talk therapy, weight loss, psychedelic therapy, we're here for that. And
amazing, man. What a mission. I mean, if you guys could do your part with the side effects of some of these medications that we've been talking about today and the sexual health piece, forget about it, man. That's like 33% of the world or something like that. It would be huge. Chad, final word from you, dude, about Mental Joe Apparel. Am I seeing this right? Are you hooked up with the UFC now? Or you got fighters wearing your shit now? Are you big time? What happened?
I don't know if I'm big time. We're trying to make it work, right? But we got a couple UFC fighters that are rocking our gear. They're local boys here. Marcus McGee. He's going up through the ranks, believe it or not. Sugar Sean O'Malley. He's got some of our rash guards, and we just Cody Crowley. He's the, I believe, number 1 or number 2 contender. He's a Canadian guy, but he should be fighting this June, hopefully. But we just sent him out a whole shtick of athleisure wear with some stuff on it. We're actually talking to an athleisure company right now, because when we were at the MAPS conference last year in June, a lot of doctors and attorneys would come up to us and say, "Hey, man, we really like your stuff, but we can't wear the special K shirt in a business meeting." And so at that point, it was kind of an aha of, eventually we'll have like a nice clean athleisure wear where it'll have our logo, super clean, but like a polo and, joggers and things of that. So yeah, we've got some things going on, but a lot of our stuff we say is, we're mom and pop. I'm a one-man band, so we're trying to grow as quickly as we can. So.
Well, I wish both of you guys the best of luck, and I'm glad that we all came together. I'm glad you're already knowing about Enthea and all that stuff. Of course you are. You're way further along in this journey than I am after just my first ketamine session. Derek Duchesne, thanks for coming on, man, and really continued success to you. If we can either be assets to you, please let us know. But we love the journey you're on, brother.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for taking the time and allowing me to share my journey and my story. I appreciate you and thank you. I commend you for all the work that you're doing for others, but for yourself. And I'm sorry for your loss and anything that we can do that I can do to help you through this journey and this next chapter. I'm here for you, brother. And Chad, Special K, love the merch, love the brand, love your story and your journey.
Wish you guys the best. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have 3 goals with Learn from People Who Lived It. 1, to help you feel less alone. 2, encourage you to seek out a coach, a therapist, a church, anyone who can help you get through your journey and find some healing. 3, when you're ready, share your story with us.
Find Learn from People Who Lived It wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from People Who Lived It.
You've probably heard me say this before, but most of the things that kill us are preventable, and that's exactly why I put my heart in his hands, in his care. I'm talking about Dr. Robert Todd Hurst and HealthSpan MD. He's my cardiologist because I appreciate his holistic approach to heart health. There's nothing out there like HealthSpan MD, his AFib reversal program, his CAD reversal program. Get the link on the resources page at learnfrompeoplewholivedit.com.